On the evening of December 20th, 1987, as the sun dipped below the Philippine horizon, over 4,000 souls, families, students, and workers were aboard MV Doña Paz ferry, heading en route from Tacloban to Manila for the festive holidays, as it was just 5 days before Christmas. The ferry was built to carry about 1,500 passengers, but on that fateful night, more than 4,000 people were on board, most without tickets, many undocumented. MV Doña Paz. Originally built in 1963 in Japan by Onomichi Zosen, the ship began its life under the name Himayuri Maru. Designed as a passenger ferry, she served faithfully in Japanese waters for years before her journey took a dramatic turn. In 1975, the vessel was sold to Sulpicio Lines, one of the largest ferry operators in the Philippines. After undergoing refurbishment, the ship was renamed MV Doña Paz, ready to begin a new chapter in Southeast Asia. Under her new name and ownership, the Doña Paz became a familiar sight on Philippine waters. She was assigned to a busy domestic route, regularly sailing between Tacloban City in Leyte and the capital, Manila. The journey took her through some of the most crowded maritime passages in the archipelago, carrying thousands of passengers at a time. A floating lifeline for many who relied on sea travel to connect islands, families, and livelihoods. On the other side, the MT Vector tanker was en route from Bataan to Masbate, carrying 1,041 tons of gasoline and other petroleum products. The MT Vector was a small oil tanker operating under Vector Shipping Inc., a Philippine-based company. Though little is documented about the ship's construction, its purpose was clear: to transport large quantities of flammable fuel across the country's vital sea routes. The tanker had 13 crew members on board. In the early morning hours of December 20th, 1987, the Philippines-flagged passenger ferry Doña Paz departed from Tacloban, Leyte Island, for the Philippines' capital of Manila, with a stopover at Catbalogan, Samar. On the other side, the tanker was en route from Bataan to Masbate, carrying 1,041 tons of gasoline and other petroleum products. At around 10:30 p.m., while most passengers were sleeping in the Tablas Strait, the Doña Paz crossed paths with MT Vector oil tanker. The two vessels collided. The force of the impact ruptured Vector's fuel tanks. The collision sparked a fire that rapidly spread on board Doña Paz. Within seconds, the sea erupted into flames. Burning fuel spilled onto the water's surface. A blackout left the ship without lights, and no life vests could be found on board. With lack of guidance by the panicked crew, the passengers had to choose if they would stay on board the fire-stricken vessel or they would jump on the flaming waters around the ship. Only 26 survivors were rescued from the wreckage, 24 from Doña Paz and 2 crew members from Vector's 13-man crew. Most survivors sustained burns from jumping into the flaming waters. None of the crew of Doña Paz survived. Until today, the death toll of 4,386 people remains the largest ever recorded in a single maritime incident in peacetime. In the days and months following the disaster, public outrage grew. Survivors, families of the victims, and the entire nation demanded answers. How could 2 ships collide on a clear night? Why were so many people left to die without help? The official investigation by the Philippine Coast Guard soon uncovered disturbing facts. On the MV Doña Paz, none of the senior crew members were on duty at the time of the collision. The ship's bridge, the nerve center of navigation, was being manned by a lone apprentice. The captain was relaxing in his cabin, watching a movie. Other officers were either drinking beer or lounging in the recreation room. When chaos struck, the crew was unprepared, disorganized, and ultimately failed to lead any evacuation. Even more shocking, the life jackets were locked in storage. In those critical moments when every second mattered, passengers had no access to the most basic survival tools. No distress signal was sent. No SOS call was made. The Doña Paz sank without a trace of communication to the outside world. The MT Vector, on the other hand, was a disaster waiting to happen. The investigation revealed that the tanker was unseaworthy, operating without a valid license, without a lookout, and without a qualified master on board. It had been carrying over 1 million liters of gasoline and other flammable fuels, and yet basic safety protocols were ignored. In 1999, the Supreme Court of the Philippines ruled that the owners of Vector Shipping were liable for the tragedy. The court declared that the MT Vector should never have been at sea in the first place, but responsibility was shared. The overloaded state of the Doña Paz, with estimates suggesting over 4,000 passengers aboard, far more than its legal capacity, pointed to another grim truth. Overcrowding and poor regulation were common in the ferry industry. Passengers were allowed to board without tickets. Manifests were incomplete. Safety briefings were non-existent. The disaster remains the deadliest peacetime maritime disaster in history, a painful chapter etched into the memory of a nation, and a tragic warning of what happens when safety is sacrificed for profit. Subscribe and hit the bell for powerful, tragic historical stories.